With sanctions having been at the centre of some of the most significant geopolitical developments of the last few years, ECFR took the opportunity to discuss the impact sanctions can have at a recent Black Coffee Morning event. There is a consensus that sanctions can be an effective tool, but that they're not always appropriate and feasible.
I think if the U.S. continues to threaten sanctions against large economies, then yes, it will eventually trigger some blowback, and you might see other great powers decide to try to find an alternative to the dollar and to U.S. capital markets. The economic rationale for that is actually not that high, but again, if countries like China, or for that matter European countries, feel that the United States is abusing its prerogatives as being producing the global reserve currency, yeah, that is a concern I have. I think Russia is in some ways the largest economy that you could see that kind of imposition happen. Fortunately, in the case of Russia, its violations were egregious enough that I don't think anyone really thought about whether the U.S. is being too eager. But if it continues to exercise sanctions repeatedly, then yes, I do think that's going to be a problem.
Some have argued that Vladimir Putin could now use Russia's military intervention in Syria as a bargaining tool, so to negotiate on its sanctions with the West and try to get them lifted.
I can't speak to whether Vladimir Putin thinks that the Syria intervention is somehow going to be linked to sanctions removal. If he does think that, he's going to be sorely disappointed. I don't think there's going to be any kind of issue linkage between what's going on in Syria, what's going on in Ukraine, and the sanctions. The sanctions are tied to Russian actions in Ukraine. I'm extremely pessimistic about Vladimir Putin, or rather Russia's ability to actually change facts on the ground in Syria the way it's changed facts on the ground in Ukraine. The fact is that the Syria intervention, my hunch is, will probably not go terribly well for the Russian military. You're already seeing an extremely high accident rate of Russian aircraft, and already a ratcheting down of the tempo of the use of Russian military forces. Furthermore, this is not going to be a popular intervention inside of Russia. It's not the same as Ukraine. So I'm sure Vladimir Putin thinks this is giving him an improved bargaining position. My hunch is it'll actually in the long term weaken his bargaining position.